just going down one time to just who you are, what you do on campus, and then we operate by the questions.
Hi, I'm Tina Alexander again. I work at the Counseling and Mental Health Services Center as a therapist there. I'm a social worker by trade. I'm also an outreach person, and so sometimes I will be in classrooms giving presentations on mental health or talking about how professors might help students a little bit better, or just talk to students a little bit better. I'm also a part of these, we just had a name change, substance use support team. I think that's sucks. It's a weird acronym. But change from AOD, which maybe y'all are more familiar with, like alcohol and other drugs than we did. But we, so I'm a part of that team and then also part of the mindful eating team. And some of that work includes talking more specifically with organizations about maybe how, if there's like body image concerns or substance use concerns, what that might look like.
Hey everyone, I'm Patrick Joseph Jr. I'm the Associate Director for Student Emergency Services. Student Emergency Services, there's a lot of emergencies that may come our way. For students, we're not necessarily 911, we're not 911. Please let me be clear about that. We do handle those urgent matters that may come up for a student. So whether that be maybe something comes up in the family, maybe there's a death in the family, or maybe a student goes to some sort of major surgery, and as a result that affects their class attendance. We're typically just the office that basically steps in to assist those students, make sure they get connected to the right resources, and either whenever with whatever they need. I also sit on our behavioral assessment team called the BAT team. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that later. But generally, you should just know that we do have a team that monitors any sort of threatening or betraying behavior that may come about within our student body, just to make sure that one, we are monitoring those items, working with the team to address those situations, but also making sure that those individuals are connected to the right resources and deploying the appropriate interventions in those situations. I also help oversee our case management team as well, which is full of case managers who work with students on a daily basis to make sure that they're getting the help that they need.
Hello again, everyone. My name is Justin Carter. I'm the Suicide Prevention Coordinator for the Longhorn Wellness Center. After acronym. So, but we are Tiffany works in the Counseling and Health Center. Tina, I'm sorry, not Tiffany. Who is Tiffany? Tina works in the Counseling and Health Center. I'm sorry, y'all. It's been a long day. I've been here since 8. Anyways, yeah. So. Works for Counseling Mental Health Center. We are on the prevention side of that work. And so we don't do any counseling, but we do a lot of programming and workshop that have to do with healthy mindset, healthy lifestyles, and specifically what I do is around mental health, right? So suicide prevention, but also mental health promotion. It sounds really grim when people first hear about it, but I actually really do get to talk about how to take care of yourself mentally. I talk about self-care. I talk about how to help someone else, how to talk to someone else who might be facing something. And so I do a lot of presentations on campus with students, but also with faculty and staff as well across the whole university systems. And so talking about those things. And then also I teach a class called Wellness 101 in the College of Natural Sciences. It's an honor seminar all about wellness and well-being.
Awesome. So that was actually a perfect segue into my first question. Just go ahead and keep the mic. If you could share what it means when we say mental health, like what does it mean when we talk about mental health?
Yeah, so mental health is, how do I explain this? Yeah, it's hard to explain, but I think people get confused mental health a lot when we talk about language when it comes to mental health. When we talk about mental health specifically, we're really talking about mental health problems. And what a mental health problem is, it's those things that happen to you throughout your day, like or I would say things that happen to you throughout your life that might cause some type of distress, or say there's a family member who passes, or there's a financial strain, or there's a test that's coming up and you didn't study for it, and now you're gotta take the test, knowing that you might not do well. Those are mental health problems, and those are really the things that we talk about within the Longhorn Wellness Center. I think folks get that confused with mental illnesses when we talk about anxiety and depression. Those are treatment-based problems that folks can see the Counseling Mental Health Center for and get treatment or get medicine for those things. But when we talk about mental health problems, it's those things that everybody deals with, right? And I think that's changing the culture or changing the language around that is where it starts, to know that everybody faces mental health problems, which means everybody should have support and resources for each other.
Awesome, thank you so much. Alongside of that, could one of you share what we mean when we talk about the umbrella term of wellness and well-being to kind of go along with it? Justin gave us that breakdown into that.
So you said that one?
If you could just give us like your definition of wellness and well-being.
Got
I feel like, yeah.
And then show that.
So we talk about wellness and well-being, we're talking about all aspects of your life. So when I talk about wellness, especially in my class, we don't just teach things on mental wellness, right? We don't just teach things on how to make sure you can have happy days and sad days. We talk about sleep, we talk about eating well, we talk about physical exercise, everything that your body needs to be healthy. That is really what wellness is. And so we promote all those things when we do our teachings, because it's all interconnected, right? So you can't have a great day if you don't have any sleep, right? You can't do well on a test and eventually go out and do the things that you want if you aren't taking time for yourself in between those study breaks, right? So that's really what wellness is when we talk about all things wellness, anything that has to do with well-being. Give me, I was about to say.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, because for that first question, and I think you hit the nail, you did hit the nail on the head. You did just. I think that, like, I'm glad you said that too, because a lot of the time when I think about, like, Justin's right, people do confuse mental health with mental illnesses. And I think that when it comes to mental health, I like to think of it as, like, the things that play into it are your psychological, your emotional, your maybe even like how you are supported socially. Those are all things that may feed into your mental health. And that can impact how maybe you show up when there's a crisis or when you're stressed out. So a lot of the times what we see in student emergency services that are things that are impacting students' mental health. Well, my dad's been sick for the last 6 months, and so it's caused me to not always show up to class. Maybe my friends are noticing a difference in behavior. These are things that are impacting my mental health, impacting how I show up. That's typically what I'm seeing in terms of mental health. And when we talk about that overall wellness, that's maybe what's happening in your family or what's happening emotionally, maybe impacting that overall well-being that you have.
I don't know how to follow up with my but to the volunteers, like, one way that y'all could really help, at least me out at the counseling center, is that students trust y'all a lot more than they don't know me. They've never heard of me, they've never seen me, I'm not at their events, but y'all are. And it goes a long way when there's a warm handoff. If someone's like, go see Miss Tina, I've met her, she's okay, like, you're going through a breakup, okay, that's enough. I think that it gets to the point where it is like, someone might show up to you and it's been 6 months and they just haven't, I'm like, where were they? Like, I'm here, I'm available, and I know that I feel like this generation has less of a stigma towards mental health, but I also think that I've heard a lot of students say that they don't think that the counseling center is for them or available. And we've had a lot of hires over the last 3 years. Like, maybe I shouldn't say that. We have everything from like a single session appointment where it's like, yo, my roommate and I are just fighting and I just need to talk to somebody about that, to there was a death in my family, right? Like there's a wide range as broad as the spectrum of students is. And I just like, I want y'all to know that there are people for them at the counseling center.
Thank you. So, if you all could share, some trends that you've noticed the past couple of years in regard to mental health and overall well-being, that'd be great, just so we kind of know what's going on. Bonus points, if you could point out some trends like directly related to our community.
Yeah, I can talk about general mental health trends. As Tina said, the stigma around mental health is getting smaller, which is great. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot more people are talking about it. A lot more people are getting active about mental health to do something positive for themselves and their communities too, which is great. And we get a lot of workshop requests. And so those trends are also going up to know how to help someone in distress, how to talk about resilience. How do I have a conversation with a friend who might be going through something but doesn't necessarily need counseling, right? We get those presentations often, and we've been getting those a lot more. And one thing I would say is pretty unique is surrounding men's mental health has actually been something that is trending up recently, which is great because I've been getting a lot more, especially within the fraternity community, of men asking for presentations specifically about mental health, men's mental health, and the things that they face that might be unique to them rather than to others who have different mental health issues, which is great. And I get to talk about things like, how do we take care of ourselves as men? What does society look like when we talk about masculinity and all these other things that might be buzzwords in our communities, right? We get to talk about those things because ultimately that affects our suicide rates on our campus, and that affects our mental health issues on our campus, is when our men aren't talking about the things that are bothering them. So I will say that is something that I have noticed that has been going up in a good way.
In fact, I've been working here since March, so I don't have the institutional, historical data in my mind right now to speak towards, but I have been working in higher education for the last several years, and I've worked at a mixture of schools, so technical schools. I worked at Oklahoma State University for a couple of years and a half, schools in the Northeast as well. And I think that one of the things that I've just been able to see overall in terms of trending, I think that there are a lot more students that I'm seeing that are advocating for their needs, advocating for their mental health, or maybe even, whereas before a lot of students didn't know about the resources to go to on campus, or that their resources existed, or that maybe even the police could actually help them if there was a mental health crisis. More and more students are utilizing those resources to help their friends or to help themselves. And so I think that's been trending in a more positive direction. And I'm also seeing more and more students who have already been connected with a mental health provider before coming to UT or before coming to college. They met with a counselor, they had a great relationship with their school counselor, maybe they're connected with the psychologist or with a psychiatrist of some sort, or maybe they just had educational information shared with them, so they have some sort of knowledge about it. And so I think that them coming in with that information, at least they're more self-aware than I was when I was in college, in terms of where I am emotionally and mentally. I think we're seeing more of that. I'm not gonna say we see it all the time, but we see more of that. And I think that impacts how quickly we can get to some folks. Sometimes there are other students who wait 6 months, unfortunately, or maybe they think counseling isn't it. That's not what they need, or I don't need any help. I'm fine. But they come to us in the 9th hour, say, okay, I do need help. So we do see those cases, but I feel we're starting to get folks on our radar a little earlier sometimes.
I think y'all, as kind of built-in organizations of community, play an important role. What I see the most often lately is folks sitting across from me saying that they felt isolated and alone. And I'm like, yeah, on this campus of 50,000 plus folks, you feel like outside of. But I think that y'all could utilize, like y'all's groups that are already existing to build on that community, like to talk about like, oh yeah, like maybe someone across from you has been feeling isolated too, and that y'all just don't talk about it. And so I sometimes sometimes I might see like the same presentation of super anxious and I'm feeling isolated like 3 or 4 times, and I just want to be like, listen, you are definitely not alone. This is not the first time I've heard this today. And I mean, and I will say that. They don't know who I just talked to. But I think that like y'all are uniquely qualified to really build on that community that already exists within your organizations, right? Like y'all invited people in for a reason. And so like building that connection is something that I would love to see.
And that's a perfect segue into the next question. So thank you for that. How can advisors and volunteers, essentially people who are not like us in doing this work on campus, how can they chime in and step in when there is a need for wellness reinforcement? What does that look like for them?
I mean, if y'all feel comfortable being vulnerable with your students, like that goes a long way. I've had a lot of students that when I ask like, okay, like all of this has been going on for so long, like what was the thing that brought you in today? So many of them have been like, well, my professor said that they struggle with mental health sometimes. And so I realized like, oh, I'm not alone in this, and kind of changed kind of their perceptions of what that might mean for them. And so I think that y'all as trusted advisors that are in these people's lives, like, I mean, first, yes, the warm handoff, because also I talked to a lot of campus partners that are like, I didn't go to school to be a therapist. Like, I'm not equipped for this. And like, yes, please don't be their therapist, but also that warm handoff is really important for someone like me who is just like we have so many resources. If it's from 8 to 5 a.m. or 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., counseling center will see a student that needs to be seen that day. In the real world, I mean, that's like an ER, but here it's not that serious. Like it's free and we're available for them. They pay more. Right? I'm like, oh, yeah. It's like, I guess it's not free. Y'all getting students. Like they pay for my job. But and so I like for y'all as advisors, like, I mean, it might go a long way to be vulnerable with your students to share. Maybe you don't have an experience of ever having anything wrong in life, but if you do, it might be helpful to share that with them. It was a joke. If y'all are seriously like, I've never had any
Just about to tell you about data.
So basically, be able to share personal experiences from our time in undergrad in order for them to relate or feel comfortable with moving forward or addressing the issue.
Yes,
That really-
yeah.
And I would even say like beyond just,
Like now.
Yeah, I was-
To be like.
right,
it's
exactly.
It's not like there's not.
I would say
anything
beyond that.
But you might.
Yeah, I mean, there might have been something that happened today or yesterday. Or it's like, my car didn't start. I don't know what I'm gonna do about this car. I just don't. Like those things open up the reality that these mental health problems don't just stick with you in college. They follow you, right? And we have to figure out how do we build resiliency to those things. And a way to build resiliency is to build connection and community with those who are also experiencing the same things. And if we all can share those things to let people know that we're all experiencing that, it becomes a lot easier to talk about. Yeah, well, I guess while I have the mic too, I wanted to give some tips too, by the way, to go along with that question. And some of the things that you all can do as advisors is to incorporate the little things. If y'all have a meeting with the organization, maybe do a check-in. How's everybody doing? That goes a long way. A check-in to say, not, maybe it's not you asking the question, maybe you turn to the person next to you and say, how was your day? How is this? How is that? Right? You can do those things. You can start with a mindfulness moment, just to allow folks to just breathe, to sit in the space and take a breath and then release that breath, right? There's so many different ways we can be mindful in that space. And then also building a culture that supports each other. How often are y'all as advisors or folks who are meeting with your organizations, how often are y'all checking in to say, did you check in with your members? Did you check in with your members? Who has this problem going on? Do the rest of your members know that they have this problem going on? That's things that you can do to build a culture of care. Because when I was in the organization, not when I was, I am in the organization, back in the day. I would say the one thing I love about my chapter is we always checked in with each other. Even to this day, right now, we still check in with each other, knowing that there's nothing that we didn't know. There's nothing that we didn't know. We knew somebody had this going on, we knew somebody had that going on. And so we are always making an effort to check in with each other. And that was just a part of who we were in that chapter. And so building that, it starts there to really build that community of healthiness within that.
I like that a lot because our students are very busy. Like, we all know that. We literally just got through doing parent orientations, talking about how many community service hours and how much money was donated in philanthropy and how many of our students got 4.0s. Like, we know our students are busy and we want to push them, but we also have to be a safe space for our students too. So I love that. Like, those are this moment to just being able to serve as that from even from these moments in these positions.
So what kind of dialogues are y'all having about social media? Because that's one of the things that, we're always talking about, like, social media is not your therapist.
Mhm.
You do not get on your Instagram and talk about, you're not gonna, the bad day and my car broke down and everything, like, you don't always get good feedback when they try those as outlets. So I'm like, talk to it a person and not to the phone.
Right.
Have that dialogue in real life as opposed to posting all of your good and all of your bad on social media, or sitting around waiting for somebody to like a thumbs up the last post that you put out, and then when nobody does show a like, then they're not listening to my feedback, right? Social media is, it's good for promotion and advertising, but it's also got an evil side. And I just think we got to talk about that in Wisconsin, and I don't know what you guys are.
Yeah, one thing about social media is it definitely promotes a culture of harm. Like, I will 100% say that. And I will also say it still promotes a culture that supports each other. So you can see a lot of different posts, and one of the things that I've been trying to do with our presentations and when I talk to students is when we see things on social media that say, it could be like a meme or something. Everybody know what a meme is, right? All right. So it could be like a meme or something like that, that says, smiling right now, but after I get off, I'm frowning. And they'll have a whole bunch of likes, right? A whole bunch of likes, a whole bunch of shares, a whole bunch of retweets. But nobody talks about why, right? Nobody talks about why is that shared all the time? Why is that? Yeah, people are relating, but why are we relating, right? And then bringing that up as a topic of conversation. And that even can be a check-in too, is seeing a post that says something that might be quote unquote funny, but it's like, it's funny because it's true, but sometimes the truth is really scary. And that has to be a topic of conversation that you bring up. One of the things, I'm sorry, I don't mean to take away all the time, but one of the things that I talk about is this idea of language and how we use it. Because a lot of times, especially on social media, we use very, very violent language that hurts, right? When folks say, oh, I had the worst day ever, I'm gonna kill myself. or I had the worst day ever, I'm just gonna off myself, right? Folks use that language often, especially on social media. And so what I encourage my students to do is to correct that language and to say, you had a bad day, so did I. Either let's talk about it, or let's not say, I'm going to off myself, I'm going to kill myself, because those are extremes that become normal. We have to figure out, how do we change that, right? Today was the worst day possible. I need a hug. That's something that you can say instead of, I'm going to kill myself, right? That's different language that we can use. And I encourage my students to see those things and say, what else can we say, right?
I think, I'm sorry, I just wanted to go back just because I had a thought. I think that one of the things, just as advisors, that y'all can do, in order to make sure that you're doing your best to support the individuals in your organizations. I think it's a big thing, is just knowing the resources. Definitely, you know, be human, be vulnerable, have conversations with your students. I think a lot of people that I encounter at times say, well, it's not my job to do that, so I'm going to send them this way. And I think students really do feel that. They really do feel when they're being passed around. And so since they show up to me, extremely frustrated. And so, you know, we de-escalate the situation and let them know what we can do. But I think that you all knowing what the resources are is huge. I'm going to talk about this soon, but I'll just talk about it now.
Yeah.
One of the, and I'll just do a plug here. So one of the things that the Student Emergency Services offers is the behavioral concern advice line. So, you know, we talk about, like, you know, monitoring concerns and, like, you know, threats and just like overall well-being issues for students. If you, a parent, a student, a community member, whomever, faculty, staff, if you're noticing concerning issues amongst, like, you know, the individuals that are in, like, you know, your organizations and your bodies, please share that information with the behavior concerns advice line. Not only is it like a reporting system for you to, and I don't even like these newer reports, it's an information sharing tool. Not only is it that, like, does it give you the ability to share that information with us so that we can do something as the university, but we also are here to consult you guys on the things that you can be doing to support that student. And that's a 24/7 service. So, like, you know, during the day, you might be talking to me. Afterwards, you're talking with, like, you know, a member of our third-party system called Protocol, which I know Tina mentioned earlier. That's really big. And that's like a great way to get plugged in terms of, okay, these are some of the resources that might be able to assist the student in this point in time. And how can I go about referring that? But also, we'll partner with you. We're, you know, in some cases, it might be best if it comes from you. But in other cases, we may do the outreach directly, and, you know, and typically we keep it anonymous unless you want the students to know that you shared that information. But ultimately, we want to make sure that they get the resources that not only the campus offers, but maybe even the community offers to help them do that scenario. And to your social media question, I think that unfortunately we aren't able, on my end, is able to be as proactive, which is why I'm so grateful for, like, your office. And everything that you guys are doing, because a lot of the times we get the students after they've already made the social media comment. And so does a student comment, I'm sure, as well. I'm sure you guys get a ton of that as well. Sometimes we're having conversations with the students together about comments that they made on social media and the repercussions of those comments. And so a lot of the time it's just, we have a lot of one-on-one conversations with those students, talking to them about, like, you know, tell me more about why you said that, and do you understand the consequences of those. Of their statements, and how maybe it raised some alarms across people, because we get the gambit, the Instagram, like the Instagram posts, the Instagram stories.
Right.
Somebody said something on Snapchat, and, you know, it disappeared, but people took, like, you know, screenshots of it, and it was a very threatening message, or it was a message where somebody alluded to possibly wanting to kill themselves. And so when we follow up, you know, they realize, oh, it's real, like, you know, people have actual concerns. Sometimes those concerns were valid, sometimes they weren't, but ultimately it's still a conversation for us to have. And, you know, I would advocate that more people have that conversation, because, you know, I think sometimes certain things are in plain sight. We may want to ignore it and think that, you know, I'll give it this halo effect, maybe, oh, everything's fine. But, you know, our students do cry out and they show it in different ways, but it's always just good to, check in.
I was just gonna say, I don't think I've ever had a student that was more upset that someone cared about them. You know, like, sometimes I do get students that it's like, okay, well, maybe someone in the community was concerned, and so the counseling center, we will reach out, and it'll sometimes as vague as like, hey, we're just checking in. Sometimes it's a little bit more specific. But if someone makes it to my office, I've rarely seen someone say like, oh, I am so livid with my advisor because they care too much. Like, that just doesn't happen. It might be an inconvenience, right, because of how busy the students are, but I think erring on the cautious, like, oh, I care about you, versus like, oh, well, maybe. Yeah, that's all.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As well, just, and Patrick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, for like my 4-week stint answering SES calls was mostly COVID related, but I think that something I think about too, that I think about a lot with my students, is that sometimes the mental health crisis is actually the result of like a basic need
Yeah.
crisis.
Yeah.
And it's presenting as mental health, but it's that they're hungry and they have food insecurity, or because they can't pay their light bill. And and so it's presenting as anxiety, because in this culture, it's a lot easier to say I have anxiety than it is to say I have food insecurity. Or some of those things. And so I realized so much of that in my little 4-week stint on SES calls, but how many of the students were like, I don't have Wi-Fi now, and I don't have this and that. And so my plug for SES, not to give you too much more traffic than you have, but they can be a really good starting point for that. And I think oftentimes we immediately jump to like the counseling center, right? Like that's and maybe that is where you need to go, but maybe before you go to the counseling center, you need to know that there's an outpost where there's food available, or that there is a program with the city of Austin that can help you get your light bill paid that month while you figure it out, or there is someone who can help you write a letter to a faculty member that says there's something going on, right? And so that exists. And so sometimes I think we do get so caught up in that concern over their mental health that we forget that there are some basic needs that aren't being met, that we might assume are being met. And that's a good SES. That's where I always start, is SES, because then SES can help dive a little bit deeper into the problem. And it might actually be easier to tell Patrick than it is to tell me that you're having one of those concerns.
Yeah, no, that's big, and I'm glad you brought that up. Just so you all know, I'll have like some flyers with me in the back. She mentioned Outpost, UT Outpost. It's our food pantry on campus. Not only is it a food pantry, and I like to always mention to people, it's not just green beans and like ramen. It's like it's a little grocery store actually. Like they have fresh produce that they get on a basically weekly basis from like HEB, and they have a collaboration or a partnership with some of the food pantries in the local Austin community. So it's a great resource for students. A lot of students actually get a lot of use out of it, but a great resource. And there's also a career closet. So if a student needs professional clothing for an interview for some reason, they can show up there, no questions asked, and get what they need. But I'll have flyers for all these things in the back with me. So feel free to stop. I'll hang out and you can pass them out before you guys leave.
We don't have a lot of time, but we do have a moment for if anybody has, any final questions or.
I just want to thank y'all. I think this has been such a great learning opportunity. And I'm really sad that all those people that RSVP'd are not here right now. Because we have to duplicate this. This has to happen again for sure. And just the three of you are excellent. And the questions, I think, we're teaming you up just perfectly. So thank you for all your help with our students. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But I just think you've been really giving practical tips and really on the nose about exactly what everybody's trying to figure out, about how you work with individuals or groups or how it shows up and what to do. I think those are all the things we worry about.
I mean, the last thing I'll say is I've been invited to some of, not a lot of the Greek lives, but a lot of student orgs. And I mean, I'm not doing this all the time, but I will show up like after hours.
Don't tell the others. They show up there, don't get it. It's just our information.
Because what I will say at the counseling center is we got a decrease in folks attending groups at the counseling center, like all the paid for group services that we offer, some of them just aren't filling. And so what I started doing last year was showing up after hours, because y'all are already meeting, right? You're already going to your scheduled meetings, and sometimes some people have invited me in, so that's also if you're wanting to talk about this more too, idea.
So there's been a decrease in attendance for group service, what are the groups?
Well, we have over 25 groups.
Different.
But like, yeah, so on the CMH, like the Counseling Mental Health website, there's a list of all the group offerings. The summer one is going to be a lot smaller than what we offer in a typical fall. But some of the groups span from first year transition space. 1 year we had puppies. That one was actually posted. Not gonna lie. They posted up, I think, in Manchester and had puppies and talked about what it was like to transition to college. But we do everything from like graduate student support to body image, substance concerns, anxiety concerns, yeah, just group counseling services. We also offer individual services. I see students on a regular basis. And I'm just a representative of 60+ therapists. And then each academic college has their own embedded counselor. That's something that the school has been really trying to flush out over the years, because it started with just like a couple of care counselors, but now every single college has an embedded therapist on site.
Tina, is CMHC continuing with sort of like the identity-based counseling focus?
If you have the answer to that question.
I was curious if there was a decision about.
Truly,
Yeah.
well, yeah, we all have seen SB 17, and
Yes.
so something I did not say, part of my actual title is diversity counseling and outreach specialist. I specifically am a huge advocate for Black students on campus, but I'm a representative of a team of 7 in addition to all of our wonderful therapists, but we intentionally hire folks that have lived experience in certain identities. And so I'm that for Black folks on campus. I don't know if my job title will change. I suspect it will, right? You can't have diversity in there. I've heard someone told me as like student success specialist or something, because that was
Sure, yeah.
but all that to say, like some of the cultural Panhellenic folks that y'all mentioned, if you want someone that looks like you and might have different lived experience in certain cultural backgrounds, like that's something you can request too.
One thing I wanted to plug is, we actually have been working with SFL with our mental health ambassadors. And so, and what mental health ambassadors is, I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you what it's kind of transitioning into. So mental health ambassadors is basically, we meet with student leaders across campus. We have an application process. They fill out the application. It's really like who are you? How many people are in your org? Come join us. Not really like you can't do this. So anyways, I digress. But mental health ambassadors, they come to us, we teach them about mental health. I gave a little snippet of what I would give them in our trainings about what mental health is, how to do the practices, how to intervene in a situation where someone might be facing a mental health issue, things like that. And so they learn those things, and then they take those things back to their organizations And the idea is to embed practices around mental health within those organizations. And so the partnership that we've had with Sorority and Fraternity Life is we have sorority and fraternity mental health ambassadors. And so one of the cool things that have come out of that twice now actually is organizations are developing wellness chairs that they are in their chapters, now in their whole organizations. And so a lot of organizations now have wellness chairs where they have to incorporate some type of wellness practices in their organization. And so that's been really cool to come out of mental health ambassadors. Now, what mental health ambassadors is transitioning into is something, is a developmental partnership, or I wouldn't say a partnership, they're in our same office, but it's more of a merging of a healthy student organization program. They talk more about all things wellness and not necessarily mental health, but our programs are kind of merging together to focus on mental health specifically and focus on everything that might impact your mental health too. So details to come, but it's an opportunity for organizations to get involved and for organizations to learn about those practices that they can embed in their organization.
Okay, yeah, I think we have about 5 minutes left in the room, but I want to take some time and thank y'all so much for again getting this year evenings. They have definitely been hitting on this point, but your students are definitely hitting you before they hit us, and we do lots of important work on campus, but y'all are very pivotal in their Greek experience. So thank y'all so much. Please give us a call if you need us. Give them a call if you need them. If you need this information, we'll definitely be sending it out, all of the links, all of the numbers, all of the handouts. So if you forget something, don't worry about it. It's coming to you. So thank y'all so much. And yeah, feel free to stick around for the next few-ish minutes and talk to us if you need anything. God,
Take another, please.
Good job.